Welcome to Functional Enough. This is episode 3, and this is where I answer some tough questions as somebody that has complex PTSD and bipolar disorder. Today we are talking about how we handle emotional flooding and triggers, as well as how we differentiate just normal stress from an actual mood episode like mania or depression from bipolar disorder, or even from being triggered from PTSD. Before we get into that, I just want to remind everybody, I'm not an expert. I'm not here to give you, medical advice or try to, quote unquote, fix you. You're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. I'm just somebody that is also on a healing journey that is trying to work through these questions myself and hope that I can create a community where people feel seen, heard, understood, and less alone. And, if your brain doesn't follow the same rules as everyone else's, or you feel like your mood, energy, and emotions are really intense or confusing or out of control, you're in the right place. This is the spot for you to be. So we're going to start with, how do we handle emotional flooding or intense triggers? Now, this might differ from person to person, but I will say that it is such a scary feeling when you're hit with like a train of emotions, and there's so many of them that you feel out of control. Like you feel like you can't even like form a thought because you're just flooded with all these negative thought loops and negative emotions, and maybe even physical panic. Like when I, am super triggered and I'm panicky, I have physical signs, like my stomach will start to hurt. My hands will get like tingly, and so will my feet. I'll start to kind of fidget like with my hands a little bit. I start breathing heavily, and my cat is the most amazing cat. Even if he's in the other room, if he senses that I'm anxious, he'll come in and lay on my chest. He's not quite heavy enough to give enough pressure that I probably need, but I have a weighted blanket that's also super helpful for those times. Anyways, I digress. So it can seemingly come out of nowhere, and that's what the confusing part of it is it's like what just happened. I was fine a second ago, and now all of a sudden I'm spiraling. But you'll typically find that afterwards, if you reflect on it, you'll find that there was some type of precursor or trigger that contributed to it. So I'm not saying that you have to do that work immediately afterwards. Do it when you feel like you're mentally capable of working through all those emotions and what, where they may have come from, why it may have happened. Like, for example, I was super triggered a couple years ago with my ex. I started a fight for no reason because I was so overwhelmed with emotion and I didn't know where to channel it. So I picked a fight and felt like I needed to let out my emotions that way. And it's not okay to use people as your emotional punching bag. Okay, I've done this. I'm not proud of it. I make mistakes. I'm human, and I didn't have the coping mechanisms that I have now, and I didn't identify the trigger. But what had caused it was I was triggered by the fact that it was Father's Day and I don't have a relationship with my dad anymore. Without getting too deep into it and be too triggering, he abused me, and we don't have a relationship now. And I was triggered by the fact that it was Father's Day and I saw my my ex-partner with their dad having a great time, and I missed my dad, and I missed having that with my dad, and I was triggered by that, and I didn't know what to do with all those emotions. And did I know that in the moment? No. In the moment, I just was all full of rage and anxiety and shame and resentment and all of the feelings that were just swirling around in my head, that I felt like I didn't have control over any of my thoughts. So something that helps me is letting myself feel the emotion, like not trying to suppress it, because that leads to compartmentalizing. It can lead to unhealthy coping mechanisms. Like when I don't deal with my emotions and it stresses me out, I don't sleep. Like I would drink wine almost every night just to be able to fall asleep, and that's not a healthy coping mechanism. So I try to identify the emotion, let myself feel them. It's like in Finding Nemo, like you got to swim through the trench and not over it. Even though that trench looks scary, we all know what happens when they went over the trench. It was even worse. So I kind of think about it like that. Like, yes, it's scary to let myself feel these emotions and think about my triggers and think about my trauma. But, I need to do that in order to heal and become a better version of myself and have a handle on it, because I don't want to push people away. I don't want to sabotage my friendships or relationships just because I've been traumatized or I have bipolar disorder. So I let myself feel them. I even might write them down or list them out, like all the different emotions that I'm feeling. And then I try to think about what I was doing or thinking about before, like right before it happened, and try to figure out what that trigger was. Because once you do that, you take back control. You don't have to let those thoughts control you or your actions. You've probably already been through enough. Like, I feel like if I've been through enough, you probably have too. And you don't need to let those emotions run your life and end up sabotaging good things for you, because it is possible for you to get through it. I promise you. All feelings are temporary and feelings are not fact. Our brains lie to us literally all the time. So if your brain is telling you that you don't have control and, you're having all those feelings of shame, guilt, resentment, whatever it might be, just know that those feelings are not fact and you don't have to be so hard on yourself. Give yourself a little bit of grace and patience and know that, yes, you may not be able to cope with it super well now. It just takes practice and it takes time. And I'm still learning every single day. It's good to have ways to help bring you back to baseline. So I call it tools in your toolbox. So like for me, I have things that I do that help me, like different breathing exercises. I have things that I like to do when I'm feeling panicky or anxious, or I feel like my thoughts are kind of taking control. I journal a lot, which is funny because I used to hate journaling. So if you've ever swore off journaling because you're like, I don't really know what to write, I feel like it's not going to be useful for me, give it another shot. You don't know. You might now be very into it like I am. And it's been super helpful for me because I'll write out, just how I'm feeling and how my day is going and what emotions and thoughts have come up. And it helps me work through them a little bit better. So that's something I do to help bring myself back to baseline. So just have things that you can try and do. And it might take some trial and error, but that way, when that trigger comes up again, you'll have more control over it. So I'm not saying you won't ever be triggered again once you identify it and work through the emotions. You probably will. Like, I still get triggered on my dad's birthday or his, or Father's Day, but I now have ways to cope with it, and I am anticipating that I might get triggered, so I have more control over it. And that's kind of the important thing for me, is I want to have control over my own thoughts and my own mind and body. All right, let's talk about, how do I know if I'm having a mood episode or I'm just feeling stressed? Well, it depends on what's going on around you, right? Like, stress is your mind and body reacting to life. So it's like, if there's things going on in your life that are stressful and you're really moody because of it, or you're slipping into like a point of like withdrawing, whatever it might be, it might make sense because of the fact that you're so stressed out. When it's a mood episode with bipolar disorder or even from PTSD, the reaction is not proportional to the situation. It is very, very amplified. And with stress, you can kind of identify the cause easier, and you can kind of identify it. And once the situation passes, you recover, which isn't always the case, as easily when it comes to a mood episode. It might take a lot longer. It might take days, weeks, or even months. You can still function when you're stressed out, even if it's a little bit harder, but you still can do it. Whereas with a mood disorder episode, it can be paralyzing. The depression can be paralyzing, and you can feel really intense feeling of hopelessness and despair. And then if you're manic, you might be euphoric, agitated, impulsive, and it can last a lot longer, like I said, like weeks or months, and it feels really overwhelming to do like any task. I once told a doctor that I hadn't showered in 2 weeks, and her response to me was, I showered today. I had a lot of really bad experiences with doctors. I could probably make a whole video about it. All the doctors just thought that everything was attributed to my PTSD. And yeah, turns out that wasn't the only thing going on. Surprise, surprise. But anyways, it can be really overwhelming to do the most basic of tasks. And if you're in that spot where you're like feeling guilty or bad about yourself because you can't get through, a to-do list, it is okay. What I started doing, instead of making to-do list, I started writing down the things that I did do that day. Like, even if I barely left my bed, I probably maybe sent some emails. Maybe I did some research for something that I am currently working on, or, maybe I took the dog for a walk, whatever it might, even if it was like small things. I just try to focus on what I did get done, rather than make a to-do list and then get upset with myself if I don't complete it. So that's just something that I do personally, and I think that helps. But again, it'd be very, very difficult to function when you are going through an episode, whether that's a manic episode or a depressive episode. So a little bit different from stress, where usually you can still function okay. Now, I do think that there is a correlation between being stressed out can possibly cause you to go into a manic episode. I feel like the amount of stress that I was under before my very big episode where I went into psychosis, that amount of stress I think attributed to how bad it was and how long it was. I'm not 100% positive on that, but I've noticed that the manic episodes I've had after that, there were also stressful things happening in my life. Maybe my life is just overall stressful. I don't know. But I do think that there is some correlation there, but there is differences between, how your mind and body react to these things and how it reacts to stress versus a mood episode. So just some differences there. So again, to kind of summarize, with stress, your reaction is proportional to the situation. You can recover from it easier, doesn't last as long. And with mood episodes, they last longer. They're very amplified compared to the situation. It's not really caused by any other factor, and it can be really, really difficult to recover from or complete tasks while you're going through it. So if you are going through an episode right now, hey, be gentle with yourself, be patient with yourself. It ends at some point, I promise. I thought my depressive episode would never end, but it finally did. And the thing about having, trauma, and bipolar disorder, and something I picked up, from being, all the experiences as a child, I feel energy and I feel emotions very, very intensely. And sometimes that's a bad thing, like when I was in my depressive episode. But I try to think about how it's really special when it's the good feelings, because I experience joy very, very intensely. And that makes me kind of have a love for life a little bit more when I have those feelings. And maybe that's a manic thing when I'm just feeling euphoric. I don't know. I don't get the euphoric feeling as much. I get more of the irritable paranoia mania. It's super fun. And I also have a lot of mixed episodes. I'll do an episode about mixed episodes at some point. But basically, that's when you're having signs of mania and depression at the same time. So it's you can't get out of bed, but your mind is racing a million miles a minute. It's a very confusing spot to be in, let me tell you. So that's our questions for today. Next time we're going to talk about trust and intimacy while having these disorders. Big things for me. So again, if you enjoyed this podcast, subscribe. You can find me on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Discord. I'm on Patreon as well. I will comment the link. It's one link that'll take you to all of my pages. If you like to check them out, I would really appreciate it. And again, the goal here is to just help people feel a little bit less alone, feel understood and seen, and know that you're not alone in grappling with some of these questions. And hopefully it helped a little bit. That's really my goal here. So yeah, I will see you guys next time for episode 4.